Hi, my name is David Solomon. I'm the Executive Officer of Safety and Risk at Master Builders Association New South Wales in Australia. I'm a certified lead auditor and I've been in the construction industry for 30 years. I'm certified in the fields of safety, environment and quality. Today I'm going to talk about 45001, the first international standard for safety management systems. Clauses 1 to 3 is what I want to go through in the first, just to get it out of the way, essentially because I'm not going to deal with it much for the rest of the presentation. Clauses 1 to 3 reference the scope. Number 2, the normative references, because there aren't any. And number 3, the terms and definitions. And they're arranged in a conceptual order as opposed to an alphabetical order. I wanted to bring to your attention a few of the dates and milestones that have taken place over the 5 years and leading up to now in Australia where 45001 is. On the 12th of March in 2018, 45001 was published in the UK. On the 17th of October in 2018, Standards Australia Committee responsible for safety management systems, known as SF001, decided to adopt 45001 after a broad stakeholder consultation. On the 14th of November, SF001 decided to withdraw 4801 based on the content not reflecting a contemporary safety approach, in that it doesn't reflect what we do today in safety. Later, we realised that wasn't probably the best decision to make, so the committee regrouped and we got to get back together on the 30th of January in 2019. And we decided to change its status from withdrawn to available or superseded, or just superseded. And the status is cited in regulation and needs to be available indefinitely. JASANT, the Joint Accreditation System of Australia and New Zealand, is in the process of reviewing the OHS auditor competencies for currency in relation to 45001 and will most likely commence the migration transition period for 3 years thereafter. So what that means in plain English is that the 3-year migration period has not commenced. They're trying to ascertain when the legislation will take up the referencing in changing from 4801 to 45001, and then the migration period will probably commence after that. The migration period essentially means how long you'll have to transition your certification of your management system from the old standard to the new. And when that 3-year time frame is decided, on whatever date that is, that deadline in the sand, then you'll have 3 years to migrate to the new standard. What clauses really matter in 45001? Clauses 4 to 6. Clause 4 is the context of the organisation. 5 is the leadership and worker participation. 6, planning. 7, support. 8, operation. 9, performance evaluation. And 10, improvement. They're the 6 clauses that 7 clauses, sorry, that reflect in every management system standard. They are the same order and the same headline and the same clause detail in every management system standard which comes under ISO. In each of the management system standards, they use the same words: should, shall, may and can. In 45001, the following terms are used: shall, which indicates a requirement; should, that indicates a recommendation; and may, that indicates a permission; and D, which is can, indicates a possibility or a capability. A is mandatory, while B, C and D are optional, at the discretion of the user. Why are clauses 4 through to 10 so special? Well, clause 4 to clause 10 contain the requirements to be met during the implementation of the OHS management system and during its conformity assessment. Clause 4 sets the context for the OHS MS itself, and it contains internal and external issues and the requirements of interested parties. Whereas clause 5 defines the leadership engine which drives the plan, do, check, act, PDCA cycle embodied in the framework of the standard. Clauses 6 to 10 follow the PDA cycle. The relationship can be seen as follows. Plan is in clause 6, which is denoted in the diagram with a number next to it. Do in clause 7 and 8, and the check in Clause 9. An act, which is for improvement, is highlighted in Clause 10. I'm going to go through some of the clauses in a bit more detail now, and at the end of the presentation I'm going to show you how these words and these clauses can actually formulate a table to make more sense of it. I'm going to go through each of the clauses. Clause 4 sets the scene for the determination of the risks and opportunities to be identified in 6. Whereas Clause 5, which is leadership and participation, the subset of Clause 5, 5.2, sets the policy and commitment to eliminate hazards and reduce OHS risks, whereas Clause 6 requires their identification, and Clause 8.1.2 defines how they are to be more controlled. Clause 9 monitors the effectiveness of the controls. Clause 6 is all about planning, and the important bits in this section are Clause 6.1.1, which links with 4.2. There's a relationship in those two, and in terms of the needs and expectations of interested parties, the identification of higher order legal requirements and other requirements, and Clause 4.3, where the scope of the OHS-MS was set. Clause 6.1.4, the planning action, very important, because this clause links with Clause 5.1 in the integrating planned actions in the organisational business processes. Clause 8 in terms of controls and emergency preparedness, and Clause 9 for monitoring. This clause also links with 7.1, resources when considering the best practices, technological options and financial, operational and business requirements. Clause 7, the organisation's context sets the scene for the degree of documentation needed to ensure confidence that planned actions are achieved. For example, small to medium enterprise will generally require less documentation than a large and more complex organisation. This clause also looks at resources in relation to 6.1.4 and the competence something required in Clause 8 to demonstrate control effectiveness. Clause 8.1, Operation Planning and Control. Clause 4 sets the scene for Clause 6, along with Clause 5 and indirectly Clause 8. While the relationships between clauses may not appear obvious, I did say earlier they're going to appear more obvious at the end when I've put them into a table. The organisational context will in part determine the methods used to control the hazards and risks identified in Clause 6, whereas the size, complexity, available resources and other factors will contribute to the methods the organisation uses to control its HR. Clause 8.1, Operation Planning Control continued. Clause 5 sets its overarching policy and commitments, and Clause 6.1.4 sets the actions planned to be taken through the clauses in the OHS-MS in light of its available resources vis-a-vis Clause 7. Whereas Clause 9 is then used to monitor the effectiveness of the controls and the availability of the resources. I want to talk about the relationships behind the corresponding clauses in 4 through to 6. So in Clause 7, sorry, my apologies. In Clause 4, it corresponds to 6, and that's where we talked about earlier in the slides. Clause 4 sets the scene for the determination of the risks of opportunity, whereas 5.2 has a direct relationship to 8.1.2, and 6.1.1 has a relationship between 4.2 and 4.3. And 6.1.4 has a direct relationship to 5, 7.1, 8, 8.1.3 and 9. 7 has a relationship with 4 and 6.1.4 and 8. 8.1.1 also has a relationship with 4, 5, 6, 7 and 9. The rest of the clauses in this table I've left blank intentionally because I think from the previous 2 slides you'll be able to see the relationship and the sequence of how they come about. So I've given you a couple of hints, 8.1.3 as to 6.1.4 and so on. finishing in 10.2, relationship to 8.1.2 and 10.2. And I've given a hint there to pick up 8.1.2, which is hierarchy of controls, which is obvious, and to review 10.2. The gap between 4801 is not dissimilar between the gap between 18001, the British standard, or Z10 or Z1000 and 45001. The new subject matter that's addressed in 45001 that's now not included in 4801 are listed below. So 4801 didn't have continual improvement, leadership and participation, actions to address risks and opportunities. It didn't talk about safety and design. We didn't do safety and design back then, 17 years ago. Outsourcing, procurement, operation, evaluation of compliance, legal requirements and other requirements. By that I mean it could be not only just legal requirements, it might be development application requirements or environmental controls that you have to take into consideration, and improvement. The gap between 801 and 45001 follows the same high-level structure. So 45001 has numerous other international management systems standards. They all follow the same high-level structure, such as 9000, 14 and 27 namely for information security management, all of which have the same 10 short clause numbers and headings. This makes it much easier to integrate 2 or more disciplines into the one document. Moreover, 45001 has been designed for organisations to integrate as part of their overall business management plan, rather than being considered a standalone system. 45001 has been designed to involve and be used by all levels of management in its own right, adopting the ISO high-level structure for ease of further integration. What we do know, or what we used to refer to as Annex SL, is now going to be referred to Annex L, or HLS, which stands for high-level structure. In the high-level structure, it's called the heading of Annex, and that's informative. So really, the Annex SL or the HLS is meant to be informative guidance on the use of the document. And the definition in A.1 in the high-level structure is the explanatory information given in this annex is intended to prevent misinterpretation of the requirements contained in the document. In saying that, the annex is meant to provide examples of what the requirements are listed in the clauses throughout 1 through to 10 or 1 through to 10 in the front end of the document. In March in 2019, the ISO Technical Management Board and the Joint Technical Coordination Group decided to change the name from Annex SL and refer to it as high-level structure, with a view to encourage management system standard integration. The second and last slide I want to talk about is my opinion only, and that is it's the priority clauses. I've been dealing with the development of 45001 for just on 5 years, and in my opinion, the order in which you see here is a pretty good reflection of the priority in which the clauses should be referenced. So in 4, which is very important to understand the context of the organisation, and then you go on to planning. Without the context, you cannot plan. And without planning, and then putting planning in place, you can't go on to 8, which is operation. And once you have operation in place, then you can do some evaluation of your performance. And you can look after that with your leadership and worker participation. After that, you naturally progress to support and then involvement. And then, as we highlighted at the beginning of the presentation, clauses 3 for definitions and the scope of the standard itself, 1 and 2, which are normative references. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank Exemplar Global for taking part in this symposium, and I thank you very much. Cheers.